Welcome back, and I have a very special treat for you. One of the smartest guys I know, truly a free range mind, as well as a great human being, devout Christian, as well as a very entrepreneurial individual, is in the house. His name is Rod Martin. He's not exactly a stranger to this program, but we are intent on featuring him much more frequently because of all of those wonderful attributes, and because he is also the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future, which makes this program possible, among other things. So he's a word from our sponsor, I guess, is what we're in store for us today. Rod, you have a wonderful blog, the Rod Martin Report, which people can find at rodmartin.org. As well as, of course, your participation in the work we do at usfuture.org, which is the website of our Institute for the American Future. A man of many parts, including having been present at the creation of PayPal, part of the PayPal mafia, as it were. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your bringing all of these skills and attributes to bear on behalf of freedom and the American future that we all aspire to have, be about freedom going forward. Thank you for being with us.
I'm thrilled to be here. And look, I know your viewers know this, but there are always new viewers, so maybe they don't. You've been a warrior on national security policy for this country and the free world since the 80s. And you've just done more than anybody I can point to. And I'm so grateful for your work. And it's an honor to get to be supportive of it and to be involved in it in any way. So it's great to be here today.
That means the world to me. We have a mutual admiration society. Let's stipulate to that. So, Rod, one of the things that we're working on at the Institute for the American Future, through one of the five very important coalitions that we sponsor, namely the Committee on the Present Danger of China, is trying to raise awareness about the danger that the Chinese Communist Party represents to our country. And I know you feel, as I do, that President Trump has had an understanding of that fact of our lives that surpasses just about anybody in public life for longer than most of us have been alive, for that matter. Talk a little bit about how you see, and more to the point, how he sees, in the midst of this, imbroglio, I guess one might call it, over trade with a regime that has been waging war against us, including in the trade space as part of their unrestricted warfare. And give us a sit rep on how it's going, as you see it.
China is the focus of, and by China, I mean the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is the focus of evil in the world today. There is nothing to compare. And there are a lot of things that would like to be compared. There's a lot of wickedness in the world, but the CCP takes the cake. They're actively practicing genocide against the Uyghurs right now. They're engaging in slave labor. They're doing everything they can to subvert everyone they can. And they're doing it because they put themselves on a ticking time clock. They, with their one-child policy, their brutal, evil one-child policy that resulted in countless forced abortions and just all kinds of societal disruption. What they've
Actually,
done,
if I could say this, just a small digression, but they boast, the Chinese Communist Party boasts of having killed 400 million, mostly
yes,
baby girls, in the
yes,
womb. So it's not
just,
countless, they're counting, and it's something
it's
like
like
that, maybe
nothing
more.
in human history. It really is. It makes the Holocaust look like a day in the park. It's unbelievable just how terrible it is, and it hasn't stopped. It's easy to think, oh, well, that was Mao. No, it's ongoing. Maybe not at the scale we saw during the Cultural Revolution, but it's just extraordinary. So, okay, what does that do? That has resulted in a dramatic reduction of their working age population. And the net result of that is you pretty quickly get to a point where you have way too many old people for the young people to support. That puts China in a huge, huge pinch, and they know it. They've realized it. They've ended the one-child policy. They're now actually going kind of pro-natalist, and it isn't working. Because the damage is already done. So China is extraordinarily dangerous in the next decade, two at the outside, because this is a country that knows it has to grab everything it can while it still can. That's how you got Putin in Ukraine, and that's how you could get Xi in Taiwan or even Siberia. There's a lot of danger here, and it's containable. I really believe it's containable, but we can't guarantee that it's containable.
Yeah.
And
I would add to that.
Actually, I didn't even get to your question properly.
Well, no, I'm coming back to it. I'm coming back to it because it's really important. But just to add to that litany, though, I think it's important to say that in addition to what we think of as the strategic arson that Xi has been engaged in, notably in Ukraine, with his Russian no-limits partner, of course, but we've also seen it in the Middle East, setting the whole place ablaze.
Oh, yeah.
So all of this is part of the dangers that you're absolutely right we are confronting. But just to drill down a little bit further on this internal situation, in addition to the age problem and the steep decline in the overall population that is now baked in, there's this other natty problem, as you know, and that is that by some estimates there are 40 million men in China for whom there are no women. Yeah, what are the implications of that as well?
And no immigration. Yeah, and nowhere anyone would immigrate from. That's the other problem. They actually have kind of the opposite problem that we have on the border, and so yeah, there's no good outlet for that there. But on the other hand, I mean, to be fair, there's a decent chance that those people will be so busy working to try to support their aging parents and grandparents and so forth that they don't have time to go invade Taiwan. But I wouldn't count on it. And that's kind of the thing. You know, countries get in trouble and they lash out. That's what we saw with Argentina and the Falkland Islands. And sure enough, within a year, that regime was gone. I'm sure that's not lost on Beijing, but they always think, as we all always think, that we can do it better and smarter and it'll be different this time. So there's real danger here.
There's danger, and I think one might say there's also an opportunity, especially if Donald Trump is intent on and able to persist in trying to reset the whole, relationship, I guess it might be called, with China. Talk about where you think that stands and what you make of people who are saying, I'm sure they're not admirers of Donald Trump even before all of this, but they're saying, oh, he's just making this tariff stuff up. He's winging it. He's not got a real plan, let alone pursuing it, in a concerted and possibly successful way. Your thoughts?
No one who has followed Donald Trump's career can possibly believe that he's winging it on anything. He gives you the impression of winging it, but that's a deliberate negotiating tactic that he talks about in The Art of the Deal. His critics ought to actually do their homework. They're actually quite ignorant. They don't actually do the reading. Trump wrote an entire book on negotiation in 1987. He wrote another one in 1990. He wrote another one in 1997, which, by the way, spells out pretty much his entire political platform, utterly unaltered from today. He has been as consistent as the day is long. And the truth is, he actually told everybody what his tariff plan was in 2018, not in 2025, in 2018. He went to the G7 and he said at the G7 meeting to the assembled leaders, look, I'm a Wharton grad. There is no question that the ideal outcome is zero tariffs and zero trade barriers. That's where we want to get. But you got to lay down your gun for us to lay down ours. And what does he mean? Well, we have lopsided trade deals that we set up largely because we wanted to subsidize our allies during the Cold War. And 35 years later, we haven't undone any of that. So Europe charges 4 times the tariff on U.S. autos that we charge on European autos. India charges 100% tariff on U.S. motorcycles. That does not mean they're collecting a huge tax. That means that we don't sell any motorcycles. Canada, same thing, 280% tariffs on some dairy products. That doesn't mean the Canadian government's making a bunch of money on our dairy. That means that our dairy farmers can't sell to Canada. And so Trump just wants to reset it, and that's his play for the world at large, but China's different. Donald Trump understands that he has to isolate this murderous, hostile regime that routinely threatens to nuke the United States. These are not our friends, and which constantly is stealing our intellectual property like the Soviets did. And if he can dry up some of their hard currency, he makes them weak enough, not weak, but weak enough that they can't risk some of the warfare that might otherwise ensue.
This is a great point on which we will return momentarily. We have to take a very short break. We'll be back with a dear friend of mine as well as a cherished colleague, Rod Martin. Please make a point, folks, of writing this down. The Rod Martin Report at rodmartin.org is a wellspring of fabulous insight and information. Don't miss it. Don't miss the next segment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are going to be continuing this really important conversation, I'm pleased to say, for 2 more segments with Rod Martin. He is the chairman of the board of the Institute for the American Future. You can follow him at usfuture.org, and me, by the way, as I am the president of it, very happily. You can also follow him at rodmartin.org, where you can get the Rod Martin Report. I encourage you to subscribe to it. It's a terrific resource. Rod, before the break, we were talking about the threat we face from China and why it is in a separate category for Donald Trump. He's trying to end its predatory trade practices, for sure. And there's some talk that there are Chinese here in Washington, though the Chinese government says it's not so. The administration is apparently having some conversations with them about this trade war, as it's being called. But I wanted to talk to you about one other aspect of this, which goes to the point you just made about diminishing the wherewithal that the Chinese have to wage this war against us, not just the unrestricted kind, but maybe the shooting kind, by ending the practice that has been going on for at least 12 years, arguably longer, but certainly 12 years, since Joe Biden helped negotiate a sweetheart deal, unbeknownst to most of us, that has given the Chinese Communist Party preferential access to our capital markets. You remember our Committee on the Present Danger of China, our leader Roger Robinson on these issues has been doing great work to try to stop this, and I think there's actually an opportunity where we might. But talk a little bit about how this craziness is contributing to the peril that you were discussing a moment ago.
Look, we made China, and we did it because too many of our leaders are bought and paid for. Peter Schweizer's done a tremendous job of showing the bribery, the outright bribery of lots of very specific American elites. And you can go back further than that. Bill Gertz did fantastic work in the 1990s showing the influx of hundreds of millions of dollars of campaign cash from the CCP to the Clintons. And nobody picked it up. I'll never understand why Newt Gingrich, who is one of the brilliant minds of our time, didn't pick up on that and impeach Bill Clinton for that instead of for Monica Lewinsky. It just makes no sense at all. But Washington has been suffused with Chinese money. now for decades, and the net result is clear. They got most favored nation status. They got to join the WTO. They've gotten to dump. They've gotten to steal intellectual property. They've gotten to grow their economy massively until they've hit the point where demography is going to hold them back. And so they're very dangerous right now, but it's an enemy we created, and it's very foolish. And Donald Trump gets it. And they're talking about potentially delisting Chinese companies from the stock exchange because they can't even meet basic GAAP requirements. It's absurd. No, if you did what they do, you would be in prison. And they're subject to American law for these purposes. So Trump is very.
But Rod, let me just pick up on that point. That memorandum of understanding basically said they don't have to be subject to our laws, securities laws and regulations. And that's one of the things that we're very insistent upon. This new chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Paul Atkins, has said, as I'm sure you know, both in his confirmation hearings and then in the Oval Office the other day when he was sworn in, that his job one for him is investor protection. You're a serious guy in this space. Talk a little bit about what it means to the kinds of American investors who are in pension funds or 401k plans or mutual funds or index funds or ETFs who don't have a clue that their money, a good chunk of it at least, is actually in Chinese companies. What could possibly go wrong, sir?
Well, it's not just that you're directly subsidizing slave labor camps and the PLA's war machine. It's also that you're likely to lose your money. I mean, the truth is they don't follow anything that could possibly be considered legitimate accounting practices. They absolutely lie about their statistics constantly, and that's demonstrable on many, many levels. And so if they're not subject to American securities law when they're selling securities to American citizens, I would contend that the Biden administration actively broke our securities law very deliberately to funnel money to them. And of course, that makes perfect sense because we know about Joe and Hunter's deal with the Chinese. So there's just no limit to the corruption here, and we shouldn't be surprised by that. We shouldn't be surprised when we see judges letting illegal alien criminals stay in the country. The cartels spend a ton of money to corrupt the Mexican justice system. Why would we think they're not spending money here? And we have to get serious about that. I'm hoping Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are very serious about that. I believe they are. But yes, this is a huge drain of American resources straight into the Chinese war machine.
Right. Let's come back in the next segment to this whole issue of immigration, border, and deportation as well, and the judicial supremacism that's interfering with it. But just to finish this key point up, Rod, you talked about the corruption of our elites. You talked about Joe Biden and Hunter. The interesting thing, which I think John Solomon first pointed out, was this memorandum of understanding that Joe Biden helped get through the U.S. government that said, uniquely in the world, not American companies, not any other country's companies, but Chinese companies can have access to our capital markets and our investors' personal savings without having to abide by Dodd-Frank's or any other law or regulation on the books designed to protect investors. And about 6 months later, December of 2013, Joe and Hunter were in Beijing, and they came away with, as I recall, $1.2 billion of walking around money to be spent buying up sensitive companies, dual-use companies here in the United States for the Chinese Communist Party. Some people say that's not a bribe, that's a commission on the whatever the number, $1 trillion that flowed to the Chinese from that MOU. We'll be right back with much more with Rod Martin. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We have one more segment, I'm pleased to say, with Rod Martin, and we're going to talk about something we touched on in the last one, but that is of incalculable importance, and that is the drama that is playing out at the moment. As Donald Trump has tried to live up to the promise that he made to the American people to get the 10 million or more that Joe Biden let into the country, illegal aliens, out of here. And Rod, you were talking a little bit about, the superb cast of characters that he's put into senior positions at the Department of Justice and at the FBI to help get this done. Tom Homan is another extraordinary player in all of this. But he's running into a huge amount of resistance from the federal judiciary. And there's a kind of judicial supremacist problem that we are seeing in places like Israel and Brazil and other parts of the world, but big time here. Walk us through how you see this playing out, and are we in the midst of a constitutional crisis, do you think?
Well, not yet. The Supreme Court has done some things along the way that just make you shake your head, and the Bostock ruling is a good example of that, where the court held, and Gorsuch actually wrote the opinion, it was 6-3, that in fact sex in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 can include sexual orientation. Well, that's just making up law whole. That is absolutely opposed to what they admitted. Even Gorsuch admitted Congress had intended, and not only that, there was pending legislation before Congress at the time on the subject that Gorsuch, just preempted. So it's perfectly possible we could get into a constitutional crisis here, but it isn't of Donald Trump's making, and I don't think we will. I think the Supreme Court's going to do the right thing ultimately. And the reason I think that is that we have, all the way back into the 19th century, consistent Supreme Court rulings upholding the president's position up to and including Trump v. Hawaii in 2018, which was authored by Roberts. So I think we'll end up...
This is upholding his position on the power of the executive on immigration issues. Because,
look, the lie being told here is that this is all about due process. But due process is only that process which is due. And this is, first of all, not criminal. Immigration has been long held by the Supreme Court to be civil in nature. So you're not entitled to a trial and a jury and evidentiary hearings and discovery and all this junk. None of that applies. Also, you have an absolute compelling state interest to secure the border. And you know why. We have all kinds of Chinese nationals crossing the border. We have all kinds of cartel people and terrorists and TDA from Venezuela, which I think the administration has made very clear. And I published an article on this by my friend Bart Marcoy about how TDA is clearly a military incursion and clearly falls within the Alien Enemies Act. So what they're trying to do is not due process, it's abuse of process. We're going to take 20 million people who came in with no process when the law required it, and then we're going to give them all an individual trial. Well, there are 700 immigration judges in the United States. They have a 3 million case backlog currently. To get through 20 million illegal aliens would take a minimum of 50 years. So most of the current illegal aliens would die in this country having lived a full life here, and that is exactly what the Democrats are trying to achieve.
Yeah. To what end, Rod?
They want to remake the electorate, and they've been very, very clear about it. And there are multiple layers to that. It's not just voting. People focus on illegal alien voting, and Rasmussen did a poll last year that found that 10% of illegal aliens admitted they had voted in the last national election. So it's not crazy talk, but that's not even the thing. If you flood California with illegal aliens, you increase their census count so they get more electoral votes and they get more House seats, which is totally corrupt. It's just another form of ballot box stuffing. If you flood Springfield, Ohio, You know, a population around 30,000 with 20,000 illegal aliens. Is that still going to be a red town? Is that still going to be a red state very long? So they're trying to remake the country because, as you know, they mostly don't have kids and they abort the ones they do. 40% of black children in New York are aborted before they can be born. So, and by the way, the numbers on that are unbelievable. Black people as a group vote pretty heavily Democrat, as you know, and yet, if they hadn't actually indulged this abortion debacle for my whole lifetime, they would be 18% of the population, not 12% of the population. That kind of math just kills you over time. So the Democrats are trying to make up for it by cheating.
Yeah. Well, and we do need to note that the purpose of the founder of Planned Parenthood was to have precisely that kind of racial motive to
She
the
referred to
elimination of the
people
black
as human
population.
weeds, and
Yeah.
she wanted them gone. And you know, there are pictures of her speaking to a Klan group, and you know, just all kinds of terrible stuff. This is a terrible, terrible thing. You shouldn't be killing babies anyway. But even if you didn't care about that, and you think I'm just completely wrong on the morality of that, okay, that's fine. It's bad national policy. It results in terrible, terrible consequences, as we're seeing in China. And honestly, as we're seeing here with the Democratic Party, it just doesn't get a lot of play in the media. But the truth of the matter is they need illegal aliens to be able to stay even or get a little ahead. And they're trying to make it an all-blue country.
That's part of it for sure. And failing that, they are relying on the courts to
Yes.
do as is being done in Israel and arguably in Brazil and again elsewhere, to fix what they can't otherwise address through actual popular vote, because
here is
their
that the
policies
case
are
law is
abhorrent to the vast majority of us. Rod, we're out of time. It has flown by. This is a topic to which we will return, I hope, next week with you. We want you as a regular featured guest, not just an intermittent one. So we'll look forward to talking with you very soon. Thank you, my friend, for all you do. The Institute for the American Future, as well as the Rod Morton Report. Check it out at rodmartin.org. And then come back to us again next time. Until then, go forth and multiply.